Well, this is amazing, and it's a great honor to be here. I've never been to Latvia before, but it's a pleasure to meet all of you, and thanks for being here. My name is Viola Llewellyn, and as Maria said, I had a chance to speak at Slush last year. And there weren't many black women on stages, let alone wearing really cool T-shirts. And I enjoyed the experience enough that when she asked me to come here, I could not resist the opportunity. I'm the co-founder and president of a company called Ovamba, which was created by my business partner, Marvin Cole, and myself to deal with Africa's main problem, which was access to credit. Now, if anybody in this room here is an entrepreneur looking to use technology to solve problems, if you're failing forward as fast as we have, then you probably understand that the very first thought or idea that you had in your head to help a company or to create an idea is not going to look the same by the time you've finished pivoting forward, or as I like to say, failing forward. And we found ourselves in Cameroon, in a place where there is barely any data, where the banks are actually the reason why small and medium enterprises don't grow, and in an environment where the culture itself has come face to face with technology, the way you and I see it. I'm born and raised in London. I live in the United States. But now we have to deal with the shifting cultures of our very own customers not being sure how to understand what Ovamba has to offer. And at the very end of the day, it turned out that every single idea that we ever had about how to help customers was completely false. And we also found that the idea of democracy in the hands of emerging markets, or in places where you've been under rule of one group of people and now you have to self-govern, creates a very vibrant future. And when I arrived here last night, I got to make friends with people. Right from the very first cab ride, I got to learn about the story of Latvia and the human beings who've been impacted by the various changes and now this amazing tech ecosystem that you guys are having, which is very similar to the ones that we're having, not just in Central and Western Africa, but as most of you know, Kenya, South Africa, Uganda, places like M-Pesa. But I want you guys to leave here today not viewing Africa as just one group of little individuals where you can relate to them because of language, but to understand that the human race is going through another evolution, and it's all about technology. Now, in the past, we're very used to the idea that things will move slowly and things will be organized, and we'll have some semblance of control over that. I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm pretty sure, when we say that the adoption of technology is getting faster and faster every single day. Now, my parents are from Cameroon, and when my dad talks to me about music, and it's all on a record, we're now moving ourselves to a digital platform. But we still have individuals that want to sell technology and solutions to Africa, forgetting that we have a leapfrog effect. We have now reached a point where we're allowing technology to dictate the directions of our lives at faster and faster rates. How do we make sure that the impact of culture and the experience of human beings remains intact? Are we looking at technology and democracy as technology for technology's sake? Or can we really and deliberately, almost like a recombinant DNA or genetic engineering, use technology to make very specific decisions about what happens to markets, what happens to people, what happens to the way the entrepreneurship ecology works out? And I started thinking about what it would be like to stand in front of you guys. And I realized that there are some things that are very similar towards us, and please forgive me if I say anything the wrong way. But as I learned last night, the effects of having been through some of the relationships with the USSR and how that has broken down, the effects it's had on people and families. And when I think about what's happened with the African nation and the fact that some of our brightest and best have gone through what we like to call the brain drain, some of it voluntarily, some of it not. In my own personal story, I think about people like my dad, who was given away as a gift. He was a son of a pretty powerful chief, and he was very concerned that my dad was living in a place where children kept dying. Technology tells us today that my father's family was suffering from sickle cell. But at that time, there wasn't technology to tell us that. And even now today, we still have situations very similar to that, whereby the narrative of the human beings who are subjected to the technologies that we as entrepreneurs develop can sometimes get lost. It's during these times that you start to see misconceptions or the purveyance of conceptions that people are comfortable with. As a woman raising capital for a tech company, and believe me, you're not going to, you can look this up, there are only 20 black women in the United States who've ever raised more than $1 million for a tech company. And of that, 25% was for fintech. I was chatting with a new friend today who explained to me, I don't mean to be ignorant, but I really do have these questions and concerns. There is no ignorance in asking questions. Democracy means that there is place and there is room for all. And technology means that the way we use these answers is either monetized or used for damage. But I do care very deeply, as I've been building Ovamba in Cameroon and now in Côte d'Ivoire, going from 10 employees now to 55 globally, what happens and the responsibilities that I have on how people experience us and how they experience their lives and what they take on with them as they build their own businesses in their lives. And we have to be so very careful about what falls through in that narrative. Navigating cultural change. The culture in Africa, especially around banking, is that if you want money and you want to grow, you go into a bank, you sit down, and 2 weeks later, they might give you an answer. In the meantime, your life is on hold. I love the fact that one of the things that we did to change that culture was to force Africans to be fast. And I'm going to address one single stereotype. There is a worldwide narrative that black people are late for everything. It's only vaguely true. We do indeed have watches. We do know what we're doing. But the need to hurry up and wait has become a very inbred part of African culture, and it affects the velocity of capital, and it affects the velocity of business and how quickly, if you're trying to do business with Africans, whether or not you get to the finish line of that deal closing. I'm happy to say that because of technology and the new democracy that we're responsible for, these things are happening faster and faster. So we created a mobile app called Ovamba Plus. It's on Android only, that allows people to get an answer for their financing questions within 60 seconds. And one of the things that we did because of culture was to take a look and take a completely bold step and say, no, we will no longer use post-colonial business practices and risk models for Africans. We will take ethnic tribal culture and embed it into risk models and allow us to finally understand what do Africans actually do with their money, how do they run their businesses, and what are their responses around repayability within a financial structure. And so therefore, we changed the culture by telling people you don't need to come into a bank for money. Most of the time, they want to sit down and meet you. They want to have a conversation, find out, does my mom know your mom? Where is the conversation in that I need to be able to touch and feel somebody and speak to them? I was in the mentoring room earlier today and was explaining to somebody that there are certain models that just do not work and that you cannot do business with Africa from a distance. You can't say that you're addressing a Kenya solution and still sit in Riga. You have to go there. And no matter how much technology is going to be around, the human beings that are involved cannot be ignored. They are impacted, and this technology is created by them. And in the world of finance, the democracy of opening up to women is something that I am completely excited about. In the place where we are, there are situations whereby within certain ethnic groups, women can't own property. And if they can't own property, they don't have collateral. How do we solve that problem with technology? Sometimes not all technology is necessary. Sometimes it's a case of looking at a problem in a totally different way. And what we realized was that probably one of the easiest things to do is to fund the growth of small and medium enterprises, not by giving them money, but by funding the importation of their goods. And that finally meant that women who run shops can get inventory and not have to go through, I don't have a house to give you collateral. First of all, in the future that we are building, we'll finally be able to use things like the blockchain to take real estate records, which are not registered, and are constantly in dispute, and make some clarity out of that. We'll be able to use tokens. We'll be able to do a lot of things, and we'll be able to stay true to the African narrative of leapfrogging over Western technology, because we've had the option, and just like many of you do, the ability to see where is the end point and how do we get there far more efficiently than previous individuals. And that's something that really, really excites me when it comes to using technology as a democracy. Democracy is a scary tool in the wrong hands. And I will be very honest with you when I say that the record of democracy on our continent has not always been very good. But there are individuals with very large mouths like myself who choose to talk about the difficult things that most people would prefer to sweep under the carpet. Because the societies that we're building, if they are to survive the new democracy that involves technology, will need to have a lot of truth and honesty, because after all, that's what data is for. One of the experiences that we had was knowing that there wasn't any data where we were. So we had to send people out from place to place, and we do the opposite of what you guys do. We take information and turn it into data versus using data to get information. A classic example of that was when we realized that within certain environments, if an ethnic group has a leader who sits and drinks with them and has conversations with them on a very casual basis, the repayability in those groups of people is a little bit lower. Who knew that? These are things that you would not know if you did not do business with individuals who are just like yourselves, building solutions to help society to be so much better. Without technology, I don't think that any of this would be possible, and I know for a fact that my investors are truly excited and happy when they see that our repayabilities are high and our default rates are less than 4% on a portfolio that's been around now for 3.5 years after coming out of beta. Let me rewind just a little bit so I explain what Ovamba does exactly. We make short-term funding to small and medium enterprises to help them to grow. And at the same time, the social impact of our activity helps us to create technologies to bring financial inclusion for those who are either unserved, underserved, or, as we call it, financially illiterate, in that they can read and write, but they don't have the same formal education, and they're part of Africa's large, sprawling informal sector. And that's why these things are so important for us as we use technology to navigate how culture will evolve on the continent into the new democracy, which is all about fairness and accessibility and openness to all cultures. I believe very strongly that a vote for technology is a vote for democracy. We see it all over the world, how different groups of individuals are using technology to have their voices heard, whether it's the LGBTQ community or women, which is something that I know I'm very passionate about, and the people I've spoken to here are as well. When you use technology to give people a voice, you give them a lot of power. And there are some places where they're not quite ready for power. But the one thing that I do know I have a little bit of a challenge around is that democracy is something that has become so Americanized. And when you take Africans and ask them to stand up close to something that actually has been the cause of them not being able to be on the same footing globally, we run into cultural challenges. We often find ourselves with entrepreneurs in this room, when you're having your new business evaluated, what tools are you using to measure the value of the company that you've created? Well, in Africa, because the private equity environment is still young, we get undervalued. If you're running a business and you're women-owned, you occasionally get undervalued. Democracy says that there's equality. So how do we bring machine learning, artificial intelligence, and other really cool tools into play to make agnostic availability of data for everybody? Ovamba has started to create something called a natural language chatbot. This means that those individuals who don't speak post-colonial languages can use their own languages and can get an answer and be responded to in either Kikuyu or Igbo or Swahili. This is what happens when you use technology to create democracy. You open the floodgates to individuals and make sure that they are accounted for in the cultural sensitivities that make sense to them, and that we're not using measuring sticks from somewhere else. After all, here in Latvia, I'm pretty sure you don't use Greek credit and risk models to assess who you are. But we still, on the other hand, want to be able to keep borders open for the exchange of ideas, technologies, solutions, services, products, you name it. We have an opportunity where we are because the beginning of our technology dawn is so young, probably just like yourselves, where we can make the rules as we choose. A pretty powerful position to be in. Most of our governments where we are don't quite understand what we're doing. But we have to continue to forge forward. And in coming here today to meet you, it's with the idea that I can learn from you and I can tell you about the things that you may have heard that are not necessarily true. Because the last thing I want to see is that we partner together and we code something that is completely wrong, or we are unable to make use of the opportunities that are put towards us, but that we use technology responsibly to close the gap between our environments. There is all kinds of tech today. You can put the words any in there. But one of the things that I'm particularly excited about is barter tech. Probably the first time you're hearing it. The ability to swap goods within social groups or within business groups that are of equal value to eliminate the use of money exchange and then potentially use wallets if necessary. The ability to be innovative. And in a democracy where technology is around, I think the battlefield becomes very, very flat once you start to get the minds of young people involved. I've been on the board of a few tech hubs on the continent, and I would love to be able to work with people here to be able to help to educate younger kids, girls to code, young boys to understand their role in life, and to eliminate sexism using technology and examples to simulate play environments that will have young kids look at the world from a far more global standpoint versus a city standpoint or a smaller geographic footprint. When we bring creativity and innovation into play with technology, we give people the responsibility to take innovation, technology, and democracy into the future. This is, I think, the only way that we can eliminate some of the really stupid wars we see. This is the only way that we can get individuals to be tolerant and even kind towards each other. I build Ovamba not just because I care about the African continent and want to make profit. Believe me, I do. And I have often said to people, in the culture that we're building, I want for the world to see Africa as a technology hub, as a place where we're no longer interested in your charity. We're here to be profitable and to be business partners that can even export to you as well. And there are so many other companies coming up behind us that are taking this standpoint, and it's a very bold thing to do. The battlefield, as I said, is for the hearts and minds of young people. I would like to be able to take people and bring them to different parts of the world using technology. You don't necessarily need to leave. You can even use AI to simulate what it's like in order to bring about cultural sensitivity within business environments or within cultures. Or the fact that I know where I live, not many people know about Latvians, and I get the opportunity to leave here and go back and explain it. But the culture change that is happening on our continent, I'm pretty sure is something that you guys have a head start on us for. We are not who our parents were. We are way faster with technology. We are far more comfortable with the idea of gender equality. We use technology to express our own sexuality. That's something that hasn't happened in Africa yet, but I guarantee it will. I just saw a very strange letter from our ministry in Cameroon that was outlawing sex dolls. I have no idea why, but they have this idea that if you give people too much freedom, they're going to be dangerous with it. But the sad thing that they don't realize is that technology has given us all an amazing amount of freedom. The freedom to be creative, creative to be inclusive, creative to be open. And this is something that I think Africa has been waiting for a very long time. But within the range of technologies that are around, the one thing that I am most proudest of is that we get to be this bold. We get to turn our backs on a lot of the colonial dictates and use technology to combat misinformation. That is the one thing that I am very, very proud of. We get to change the banking system and be disruptive. Without disruption, I don't think that democracy is possible. It is an integral part of it. And it's actually something that young people enjoy. And we need to give space for people to experiment with that. Whenever I say, this ain't your granddaddy's Africa, people laugh. But believe me, people, this is a brand new day. I want to thank you for allowing me to share the stage with you today. I want you to take away this one thought. Do not ever be afraid to ask questions about people who are different from you. But be very aware that technology can knit us much closer together. And wherever there is a joining of individuals, regardless of the distance, there's the ability to build amazing businesses that will change the world. There are 1.1 billion people on the African continent right now. And by 2040, 40% of them will be under the age of 40 years old. It will be impossible for you to walk anywhere and not run into somebody like me. So do yourselves a favor. Get ahead of the curve. Don't worry about the stereotypes. Ask any question that you want and operate with these human beings knowing that you are united by technology. Geographic divides don't matter. You don't need to remember what our history was, but together we can make sure that this ain't your granddaddy's Africa and we can go into the future. I am very excited to have been with you today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I want to thank you all sincerely. Have a great day.